Some of the views expressed on the Mormon Channel are solely for the education and inspiration of our audience and may not represent the official position of the Church.
We believe in God, the Eternal Father.
We believe in the Bible to be the Word of God.
We believe in being honest, true, chaste, benevolent, virtuous.
We believe that through the atonement of Christ, all mankind
We also
will be
believe the
saved
Book of
by
Mormon to be the
obedience
Word
law.
of God.
We may say that we follow the admonition of Paul. We believe all things. We hope all things. We have endured many things.
Welcome to Why I Believe on the Mormon Channel. My name is Rick Starr. Our guest today here in Arizona is Jineane Ford, who has been in Arizona. You're a long-time Arizona person.
Yes, as much of a native as you can say. Yeah, I actually moved
native.
here when I was 3 years old from Washington State, so that's pretty much a native, I think.
Well,
I claim
welcome
it,
to the program.
Thank you.
You grew up here in Gilbert, Arizona, but you've also been a longtime resident and present in the TV, the news programming here.
Right.
On many stations. In sports, you've won Emmys.
News, yes. Well,
so-
news, primarily I was always in news, but it's kind of a funny thing because more of my little Emmys were in sports than news, but mainly as a news anchor and reporter.
Yeah.
And with Channel 3 first, then I disappeared and went to Tampa for 3 years, then back to Channel 12 in Phoenix. Yeah.
And I remember watching you on TV many years.
good,
I lived
good.
here for many of my younger years, and I've seen you on TV many times.
Good.
We just moved to Utah about 5.5 years ago, and so I've seen you much on TV. Well, welcome to Why I Believe. It's great to have you here with us.
Thank you so
today.
much. Good to be here.
Well, as I mentioned, you grew up in Arizona and in Gilbert, and I'd like to hear a little bit about your growing up years. How were you raised? What was your upbringing?
Basically, everything had to do with, I was really an Aggie kid, if you will. Everything to me was my horses, 4-H, Future Farmers of America. I wanted to be a veterinarian, and everything, I surrounded myself with all these animals, and I was always fixing and doctoring everything. And I had a little chicken one time that one of my horses ran over him and bent his leg in half, and I had to get the popsicle sticks and the plaster of Paris, and I set the little chick's leg. Well, then the chicken became like a magnet. He wouldn't leave the back patio, and he lived his whole life hopping on our back patio, and he became more like a dog, and we called him Magnet. It was, and he was, so we had, things like that. I have just, have always had a fondness for the animals, and always loved that sort of thing, but it was in the Future Farmers of America at Gilbert High School, and I grew up as a Tiger, graduated from there in 1977, so.
Oh, that is great.
Yeah.
You are back in Gilbert now, and your family, your children, love football.
Oh, they do.
Talk a little bit about the football rivalry that's going on in your life.
It's kind of hard. They are going to a Gilbert school, but they're going to Desert Ridge. And it just so happens that tonight Desert Ridge is playing Gilbert High School, my alma mater. And it's going to be really hard because I'm going to sit there and I'm going to hear the Gilbert fight song, which always makes me get a lump in my throat anyway, because I don't know if you remember, but in the old days, Gilbert was a powerhouse. I mean, we were just amazing. And my brothers played there, and it was just everything. And so I have a lot of dear friends, and one of the coaches, Steve Lane, he baptized me.
Oh, boy.
So for Gilbert, and his son is like their star player, and he's going against my son tonight. It's gonna be a difficult game. I just hope, I'm supporting my boys and everything else, but it's one of these things where, okay, I want my boys to win the game and do a good job and everything, but I don't want us to run over them or anything. That would just make me feel horrible. I'm hoping. And if they win, that's good, but I just don't want them running over. You know what I mean? I want everybody to be happy. I want to make it all better, but I don't think I can tonight, but I don't know.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we'll see how that turns out. So.
Hopefully everybody's sleeping in the same house tonight and nobody's angry at each other.
Right.
Oh, what a great story. Well, as you mentioned, you were baptized by Steve Lang. You were a convert to the church.
Right.
And you talked a little bit earlier about your father being a strong, staunch Baptist.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Yes.
A lot of your friends really planted seeds in your life, earlier in your life. Were you religious during the time? I mean, you didn't go to the LDS church. Did you go to the Baptist church? Or
I would go to the Methodist church sometimes. We weren't super active, but we would go to church, to the Methodist church, and I'd go to the Wednesday night little, the Methodist version of Mutual, if you will, and kind of, we'd all get together and we played volleyball. And Methodist was very, just kind of non-denominational, that kind of thing. I mean, it was kind of a real, you know what I mean, a real nice. I never attended the Southern Baptist Church. My dad was raised that way, and since we attended the Methodist Church in Gilbert, my dad has gone back now to the Southern Baptist Church as he's gotten older. And quite frankly, around the time before I was taking the discussions, he invited me to a Southern Baptist church, and I was almost scarred, but it was okay. It was a really loud and demonstrative, and I remember a KFC bucket being passed around, and it was some tent revival thing, so it was really fun. And I was with my dad, and it was just it was interesting, but we attended the Methodist church, so we weren't it wasn't a real heavy. Type of a thing. And I tell people my biggest things living in Gilbert were all of the kids and the youth, because almost all of my friends and some of my closest friends were all LDS kids, and my dad used to prefer that I ran around with the what he called the Mormon kids. He wouldn't let me. My dad was very strict, so a lot of things in the church, it wasn't really. I'd like to say, it was a really big changeover for me. It was a really hard switch, but a lot of things, it really wasn't that hard. My dad was I had to be extremely modest. I mean, he didn't allow me to wear blue jeans to high school. I had to wear skirts or dress slacks. Yes, that's how bad my dad was. Yeah. So, I mean, I was the modest of the modest, yes, and very strict, and he was more that way. Because in his family's church, the brethren back east, they weren't even allowed to dance. And he let me go to a few school dances with a few people, but I swear he was waiting outside the door. I mean, he was just very strict. So, I was on a very short leash, if you will, and my family was and so I was a pretty good kid.
Yeah.
It
wasn't a real difficult change.
Yeah. I was a pretty straight kid growing up, and I was in Future Farmers of America Science Club. I was never a cheerleader. I wasn't cool, couldn't jump off the ground, that kind of thing. So later, when I became Miss USA and Miss Arizona, that was a really strange thing too, because I wasn't like that in high school. I didn't do any of the cool things, if you will.
Yeah. So you got into pageants. You were Miss Arizona.
Yes.
In Arizona.
And that was another thing that almost scarred my father. It kind of fell into it by accident, and the funny thing is, I'll never forget, at Miss Arizona, you wore a one-piece bathing suit. Well, I was never allowed to wear a two-piece bathing suit. I mean, I practically had the one piece with a skirt on, and back then everybody else was wearing two pieces. So when I went back to Miss USA and my dad pulled into town with my mom, it was the day before of the preliminary night, and they did this photo shoot with Catalina Swimwear. Well, they had me modeling bikinis, and what happened was they put it on the front page of the paper. I was Miss Photogenic, and I win that. He gets into town, he opens the paper, and it's the full length of the paper with me in a string bikini, and he almost had a heart attack. My mom says he started crying. Her life's over. She's, so it was, bless his heart, that was a hard thing for him too. He's funny, but we like to tease him. So, yeah.
And Miss Arizona took you on to Miss USA.
And that was back at Miss USA in Biloxi, Mississippi. And that was in 1979. I was in Miss USA in 1980. It was actually 1980. 81 is when I gave up my crown. So it was in Biloxi, Mississippi. And so that was fun. And I lived in New York and traveled all over as Miss USA, and you travel around to different malls and all over the country, and so that was interesting. Appearances and signing autographs, and it was interesting for me. But with my background, it was really it was a fun thing, but a real superficial thing for me. I remember sitting there just thinking, this is really kind of silly. So it was fun, but it is what it is. It was just, but what it did do for me, when I was on the stage at Miss USA, a man by the name of Bill Close, who is a longtime newscaster here in Phoenix, longtime newsman, he was watching the Miss USA pageant, and Bob Barker asked what I was interested in doing. And I said, well, I was talking, and it was when Bob Barker interviews you, and I get a phone call after that, it was, I mean, when I came back to Arizona, he had heard I was back here in town or something. I get this phone call, Jineane, Bill Close on the phone, Channel 10 News. And I go, you need to stop goofing around with that pageant stuff, and you need to be a newscaster. You need to get your life straight and do that, and just telling me. And I remember hearing this. I go, yes, sir. I'm listening to him going, what the heck? And so, long story short, that's how I ended up getting into the news business, is because of Bill Close.
Really?
He said, you don't need to be doing this frivolous, dumb stuff. And you need to get down and talk to the guys at Channel 3. Channel 3's management had just left 10 and they went to 3. I went down there. Phil Alvidrez, who's also a member, by the way, he hired me. He was at 3, and I didn't know that back then either. I wasn't a member yet. And he hired me as a news trainee, and I started writing copy and being a news trainee, and then I ended up doing the morning cut-ins, and a girl who also took me under her wing and was really helping me was a girl by the name of Ruth Todd. Who ended up being an anchor. She was an anchor at my station at 3. Takes me in her wing, starts teaching me the cut-ins. And little did we know at that time, she hadn't told everybody she was pregnant yet. She's pregnant with her first baby. And she looked at me and she goes, Jineane, do a good job on these cut-ins because I'm going to be leaving. We're moving up to Utah and I'm going to have my baby. And she was saying all this stuff. So I end up taking Ruth Todd's place. She would let me sit on the anchor desk after she did the cut-ins and have me do the cut-ins after her, and then the news director, and then they started to look, then they knew she was going to be leaving too, and they started watching them and started training me. So they literally groomed me and trained me, and Ruth helped me go into the business. And so that was what was so neat, is that now I know Ruth's been up in Utah and everything for years now, and so she was the one that I replaced at Channel 3 20-some years ago. Yeah.
Oh,
so,
what a wonderful story.
Yeah, so it ties into all these people.
So Jineane, Ruth Todd, actually, who you replaced, she was a host on one of the shows on the Mormon Channel called Conversations. Recently, she went into the public relations department of the church. But isn't that interesting, that connection?
That is so funny.
Ago?
Isn't it just a small world?
Yeah.
You have to tell her I said hi.
Okay,
Tell her to get me a note on Facebook or something. I would love to talk to her because, as I don't know, and I'm not sure if Ruth knows that I joined the church.
Really?
But I remember her well, and she was such a sweetheart. And of course, she was so young back then. She was pregnant with her first baby, and I remember being so excited. But just a sweetheart. Again, one of these neat examples, and me always thinking to myself, "What a great gal," And
that's wonderful.
she's wonderful.
That's
yeah,
wonderful. You're listening to Why I Believe on the Mormon Channel of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And today our guest is Jineane Ford, who is a longtime Arizona native and has been a TV news anchor here in Arizona many years. And you talked earlier about the fact that you moved away for a while to go to Tampa to do the news, Tampa, Florida, and then you ended up coming back. And
Yes.
Let's talk about that period of your life. And eventually you were, I don't know if we'd call it reintroduced to the church, because you were already well acquainted with the church, but you had a lot of interesting things that happened in your life that brought you to the church.
Yes, I came back and was working at Channel 12, KPNX, and started working there. And basically what happened, and when I think about all the stuff as far as the church, I, married and you're working, doing the news, all this kind of thing. Well, time's slipping away, and I'm just kind of thinking, I really need to think about, I want to have a child, I want to have a baby. Because news gets going in your life, and you don't realize that it's slipping away so fast. And suddenly I was 34 years old, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, what if I can't have children? Something struck me. I kind of panicked. I was like, oh no. And so talked to my husband, and basically we start to plan all of this. And this is funny how some of this stuff works out too, is I had signed a contract, and I end up getting, and I'm pregnant, and I'm having Cody, my oldest, and he was just, solid colic for 6 months. I mean, the 24-hour colic kind, and there were such funny clips. They'd come out to see me and visit me, and he was just screaming nonstop. He was so funny, and but I had Cody, and he was just absolutely wonderful. And then I had Austin, and he did nothing but giggle and laugh, and I'm just like, and I remember thinking to myself when they were little like that, I can't wait. I am going to make these boys they're going to be this way and this way and this way. And then I remember holding them and thinking to myself, they really are somebody already. And there are things about them. And when you hold your child and your baby, you're kind of like, wow, they seem to come with a lot. And I remember thinking that all the time, and how different they were. So then when I became a mom, that just really, really changed me a lot. I mean, my boys just suddenly, even doing the news and covering stories, I could cover all kinds of stories and go on them. And now suddenly something would happen to a child, and I just was a basket. I would have a much harder time. And I started to cover beats. There was a little boy, and there's a group out here called Positive Impact, and I just adore them. They're these moms that basically came together, and when things weren't covered by insurance, they said, heck with that, and they'll throw yard sales. They started here in Mesa, and they threw these huge sales and everything, and they pulled the money together. Our one little poster boy is the Flake baby, Jonathan Flake. And Jonathan, I don't know if you've ever remember hearing his story, and his family is wonderful. They live here in Mesa. But the Flakes, she was pregnant, and we got a phone call, and these are the stories I would cover, that he was the worst form of spina bifida, and that if he was born, he'd stop breathing right away and they'd lose him. But there was an experimental surgery where they went inside the uterus, but it was back in Kansas City, but they wouldn't pay for it, of course. So Positive Impact hears about it. They start throwing those yard sales, and they're making quilts. And suddenly, literally the first weekend, I do a story. People start flooding out there, giving. It was so cool. I mean, these were just the most fun stories, most fun beat ever. And we raised I think $60,000 that he needed that weekend, first weekend, and they were on a plane because she had to go. It was a short window. Jonathan is amazing now. He is an amazing little boy. Jonathan is close to... He's got to be close to 10, 11 now. He's wonderful.
That's
and he's still in a wheelchair. He goes through different surgeries, but he is the most bright, shiny, funny. Oh, my goodness, Jonathan. And we throw these Scrubs balls that for them to raise funds. They call them the Scrubs balls, and everybody dresses their Scrubs up in wild, wacky, and I MC it for them. But I became involved with this group, and there was another boy from up in Snowflake that needed a bone marrow transplant, and the insurance wouldn't cover it again. And they didn't have a place for yard sale, and I was sitting there in one of their meetings. I go, do you want to use my yard? Because I lived in a place where they're in near Gilbert and McKellips up there. That we have big wide streets, kind of like this. It's an easy place to.
Right.
Those yard sales with Positive Impact would turn into a 2-mile yard sale. Wow. That weekend for James Spires, we raised $100 and something. And I remember sitting at the bake table. They threw me on the bake table, and a man comes up to me and he says, "Looks like a really good brownie." I said, "It is. These brownies are really, really good." And he says, "How much are they?" I said, "Sir, whatever you would like to donate to help James out." And he drops 5 $100 bills on the table. Wow. And he takes his brownie and leaves. That's exactly the kind of sale it was. And it was just, I'm just sitting there going, it was really neat and just so heartwarming. Okay, that brings me.
You were at this point. You were a pretty new mom yourself, weren't you?
Yes, and when I started covering those beats, and so I loved those stories, and I loved. And also in the news business, it's very hard, and you have a lot of negative, And I loved the positive stories where people made a difference and they turned things around, and they knew that they could make a difference and do something about this. And I loved that they were saving children and moms and dads. I mean, there were all different kinds of. I'd get a call at the station, so I started to feed them. I kept them a little bit busy because then I'd get calls. There was a family that the father was incarcerated for most of his life, and he was younger when the mother, they had 6 little kids. The 5-year-old had leukemia. The mother was killed in a car accident. And the grandparents are suddenly getting these 6 kids back. They just had retired, and he was a framer, and she worked, I want to say, at Borden, something like that. But they were retired, and they were getting these 6 children back in a little 2-bedroom block house here locally, I think in the older part of Mesa. So I called Positive Impact. So cool. They call out all these guys, and again, the most amazing service projects you've ever seen. Call them all. They find out what they can do, and they add on 2 directions: a girls' bunk room and a boys' bunk room, and
onto
bunk beds.
House?
And yes,
really,
because school was starting in 2 weeks, and they literally all the supplies, all the stuff, and they just did it. And no red tape, no filing a bunch of papers, and so I just love that group. Around that time, I decided to move into this house, which is now Positive Impact I jumped ahead a little bit, but there's right near Gilbert and McKellips. It's Harris Second Ward is what it is. I find this little horse property house. I've got the horse background, and I really wanted something that I could jump on the freeway, go to Channel 12, be close, but still have a little horse property. Well, Gilbert and McKellips, there's a little area in there where they're acre, and I find this house, and it is the eyesore of the entire neighborhood. It was horrible. It literally had cacti. The couple that lived there, this elderly couple, they literally grew this cacti. I mean, clear up over the eaves of the house, around the whole place, kind of closing
like
the world
a
off.
saguaro cactus?
Prickly pear,
Every kind.
like tons
so
of prickly pear.
So very desert landscape.
Well, let me put it this way. It took like 6 huge dumpsters to just remove the cactus.
Wow.
And this is an irrigated acre. So I'm looking at the property, and we buy it really relatively cheap, and I'm just kind of like, all that has to go away. All that cactus is just, and half of it was, and it was so old and dead. It was just not any beautiful sorrel. It was all prickly pear, just solid wall of it around the whole. Well, the neighborhood is a really nice neighborhood, and Ralph Pugh, Jineane Pugh, I don't know if you know the Pughs, and the Machauds. Dr. Machaud, he's a dentist. He's a pediatric dentist. They're all church members. Well, I find out later that I have moved into the heaviest concentration. That square mile from Stately to Gilbert and McKellips to Brown,
yes.
It's the heaviest concentration. There's like 4 wards in that square mile. It's crazy.
In Mesa.
Oh, they're constant. So, and I didn't realize this, but I move in, and we decide to have a couple of dumpsters delivered, and I kid you not, the dumpster gets dropped, and this guy comes to my door, Dana Duncan, nicest guy. He's knocks over, he goes, "Hi, I was just wondering, I have some scouts that they're looking for a service project. What are you planning on doing here with your yard?" And I start to tell him, and he says, "Well, do you mind if we come here tomorrow morning?" And now he came on a Thursday, so it was 2 days later. Thursday afternoon, he knocks on my door, says that. Now, and I had no idea that this was like, I was becoming the word service project immediately, and I didn't know what that was. Well, it's Thursday. Saturday morning, I think a few scouts are showing up. All of a sudden, more dumpsters are dropped, because I told him we were going to wipe out all this cactus and get rid of all of it and make it irrigated. I'm not kidding you, no less than 60 people
really
show up.
Are you talking about scouts, or you were talking about
scouts? And members, everybody. I find out later President Anderson is there. Bishop Fishbeck is there. I didn't know any, but they were there in my yard with their little kids and their what. They literally all come up
on your family,
and meet me, and I'm just, and so I'm in tears. I'm like, "You guys don't have to do this." And they go, "No, it's no problem at all." But they had more dumpsters delivered, and they just. But you know what I started to tease about? I said, "It's just that this house is so hideous in the middle of your neighborhood, isn't it?" Because it was that bad looking. But they literally just tore everything out of my yard and put it in those dumpsters within, it was an hour and a half.
Wow.
It was scary how fast. There were missionaries, and I find out later, it was a huge service project. But they do service projects every Saturday morning, or every other Saturday morning, I don't know how often, but they do these, and they just made a few phone calls, and everyone was there.
Wow.
I was blown away. So I'm in tears, and and my husband at the time, he says, "Wow," he says, "just unbelievable." So it started with a service project, and I'm staying in the front yard, and then I'm talking to that Dana Duncan, and I said, "You know what? I said, I really would love to. I've always wanted to learn more." And then this was the big thing. My boys. About the time I bought that house, I kind of knew that I knew I was moving into pretty highly, and I kept saying to myself, I had talked to my husband, I said, "I really want to learn more about the discussions. I really want to invite the missionaries over." And I've been saying this, but then the service project happened, and I was like, okay, this is the time. I'm going to jump, because I was no longer afraid of my dad, afraid of what he was going to say, and my big push were my 2 boys. I would look at my boys, and I was kind of like, I want much more for them. I knew I wanted more for my boys. I knew I wanted them to be like all of those kids I knew in Gilbert, and the great kids, the great youth that I knew.
How old were they, Jineane?
They were only, at that time, Austin was, I want to say 3 and 4 or 4 and 5. I'd have to look at the dates. Probably 4 and 5, 3 and 4, or 4 and 5. They were just little. And I knew I wanted more for them. That was my biggest concern. And I didn't have a real, base and I was kind of floundering out there. So then this service project happens, and I'm just like, this is perfect.
You got to find out more.
Yes, I need to find out more. So I mentioned it to ask my husband. He said, yeah, that sounds great. I talked to Dana Duncan, and within a couple of days, this is funny, and you think about how Heavenly Father sends you the exact person. It was so, and I just love Sister Perman. I always call her Perman. Her name's Tennille Perman Farr now. She's Sister Farr. But she's married and has a lovely family now. But I will tell you, she came to my door, and it's so funny because she could be my daughter. She's just the sweetest. I mean, I'm not saying that I would have this, the most, but she is, it's funny. She's raised on a ranch in Idaho. She castrated her own calves, did all the same things I did. Exactly the same background, the same, she was so much like, I was looking at this younger, I'm just kind of like, you're like me.
So an immediate connection,
she was
really.
Exactly. Oh,
Yeah.
and she was funny. She had the sense of humor, but she's a real pretty, almost 6 feet tall, 5'11", 6 foot, sings like a bird. No one in my family sings, can't sing. But she just absolutely was the perfect. And there was another sister missionary with her, but they kept rotating the girls out at that time, and Tennille was the constant. And she taught us the discussions, and I just love her. And we are to this day so close. And she has a beautiful family, all these boys. And we've met up and gone to General Conference. And she's just a wonderful girl. I just love her. And and there was a moment in the discussions that really, really, she had little cutouts of the celestial plan, of the whole plan of salvation. And when she had these little cutouts and she's putting them on the floor and we're talking, and one thing that for some reason that was the discussion, and that one was third, I want to say, third one in, I believe. And that one, I knew all of it. I mean, I'm not saying I knew all of it, but I did. It was so familiar to me. I was just like, yes. And I kept saying, yeah. Exactly, and it was all too familiar, and I knew that was and it answered so many things for me because there were so many things. It was just familiar for whatever reason. I knew at that moment I felt like I was at home, and that was the discussion that really put me, wow, I'm where I'm supposed to be. Then, and when you're taking a discussion, certain things will happen, whether it's family or my husband at the time, and that ended up being my ex-husband later, he joined with me, just to make a long story short. And then it's almost like the adversary, he just got full-on attacks from every angle. It was just weird. His business partner wouldn't do business with him anymore because he was, and all these things attacked him, and nothing really came at me. I think because I really think that during the discussions, I was so just that I was just like, I was aware of some of that, and I was just kind of almost like, bring it on. Try me. And nothing, so nothing, I mean, things happened, little weird things, but it was just like, nice try, and I just keep going forward. Where he was kind of felt a little bit more, you know what I mean? He wasn't sure. Yeah. I think he was kind of doing it with, he wasn't really doing it for himself, and I know that's, you have to really, really be there. Yeah. You have to be really knowing it and really reading about it, really studying it and really knowing it for yourself and praying about it. And so I was just running full force, and I just really felt it, and I was really there now. But because he started to, do this, I kept going forward, and then finally that kind of, down the road, and it was sad. There was a couple more years, but it was just tough, and but I knew that I needed to be where I was, and that was the answer for me. Now, my dad, I remember there's a moment where he passed me in his truck, and he said, and I said, well, yeah, and I'm taking this discussion. I was talking to my dad, and he says, hon, I'm really concerned about you, all this. So I had him come to my house, and the sister missionary showed up, and we all talked together. And he learned a little bit more, and he was not as worried So he hasn't, but he went through 2, discussions, and he'd ask, well, what about this and what about that? And the sister missionaries would talk with him, and they were really, really sweet. And some of the people in the ward that would come in on our discussions. And so my dad kind of calmed down. But then during my discussions, the Easter pageant, it's that time of year, and the Easter pageant happens. The Mashads, which are in the Harris Second Ward, they still live in the same house. He's a pediatric dentist across the street, and they invited me to the Easter pageant. And we went ahead and went, and I was right at that point where I was deciding, should I be baptized? And I was taking discussions, and it was about that. It was after that third lesson. I want to say that third discussion, because I was taking the discussions right around that time that Easter was hitting. Wow. I want to say maybe it was the 4th or 5th discussion then. And I wanted to get through all the discussions and see me, the reporter in me. I wanted to study everything and look at stuff, and I wanted a lot of, and then I'd pray about it, and I went through different stages too, where I wanted to really, but then I'd say, well, and then an answer would come to me. It's not all done. You don't have to know it all. You know what I mean? Oh, you don't have to have all your little answers of every little thing. And I'd go, yeah. So the little weird reporter part of me, I struggled a little bit with that.
You wanted
and then
to
I
know
back
it all.
up. Yeah.
But your testimony continues to grow after you're baptized.
I want bullet points. Yeah. So then, but it was just wonderful. And then I'm there at the Easter pageant, and there was this moment that just was amazing. And it was one of those nights where the rain, it was just threatening, and it was really dark. And we all had our umbrellas, and it was a chilly night too. And we all have our umbrellas, and it starts to rain. It's not a heavy rain, but it's raining, and it's just, and you could see it would spit kind of hard, and then it would back off, and then spit kind of hard. And we're holding our umbrellas, and we're waiting for it to start. And it was weird. This real little soft breeze came in, and they stepped out to do the opening prayer, and they did the prayer, and it just stopped. There wasn't another drop, nothing, and all the rain and everything just stopped, and the Easter pageant started, and it was so beautiful. It was wonderful. It was so, and when there was one, and I always tell Nancy this about Mary, Did You Know? When that one came out, of course, I was just a sobbing fool on that one. And all the different numbers and the virgins and the dance, every part of it, I just absolutely loved it. And I was there, and I could just feel this little wind on my face. And I remember it was there during the Easter pageant. I was staring into the Easter pageant, and I never wanted, and I kept saying to myself, I never want to leave. I want to be right here. I felt the Spirit so strong, and I just said, and I was like, I'm being baptized. I'm being baptized. And I think I walked around that night and just walked up to people and told them that. I think I was a little bit, bit just overcome. And I just kept, and I saw my sister, Tineal, was there, and I just walked up to her and I said, Tineal, I'm ready to be baptized. And she's like, oh, good. And, it was just so wonderful. And then I asked my dear friend Steve that I grew up with to do it. And it was just, and then my boys were baptized, and it was just wonderful. But it was at the Easter pageant where it all just
it all came together.
Yes, it all came together for me, and I loved the discussions, and it was the perfect sister missionary. It was, and what I think I really, really love, and I tell people this, is that the beauty of the plan of salvation too is that really when you look at the whole entire, so many people in their churches and stuff have little pieces. They have little pieces of truth, and you hear them, especially in funerals. You hear it all the time. You hear them say that, they're hoping. We hope to see them someday. We hope to. They kind of in their, they know some of it, but they don't know where to find it.
They're not sure how it all fits together.
They're not sure how it fits together. They kind of know that they're going to maybe see them, and they could see their family, and they might be with their family, but they're just lost kind of, and they don't know. Yeah. And so the minute you see it, and you're going, that's it. That's why it all, and holding your babies, and why they come with so much, and why I couldn't just crack that whip and make them exactly the way I wanted them. There were so many things that fit together that made perfect sense and were too familiar. And that's where it all came together for me, and it was just so wonderful. So,
wow, that is wonderful. You're listening to Why I Believe on the Mormon channel of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And our guest today is Jineane Ford, who is a longtime Arizona resident and has been on the news here for many, many years. And I had a question as you were talking about this. How did your associates at the news channel react to your joining the Mormon Church?
There was a moment, and I have to share this because this was an important moment too. I did have while I was about to be baptized, and my dad had heard about this. He did have one of his guys within the Southern Baptist Church make a phone call to me. I happened to be sitting in the newsroom, and my co-anchor Kent Dana, who grew up in the church, was sitting in the cubicle next to me, and he hears me answer the phone, and this man starts to give me a hard time. And what happened, and when I mentioned to you about answers, I didn't have what he was saying, these ugly things. I didn't have the words or the specific answers to answer back to him, and I wanted to be able to say, well, no, I wasn't familiar with the doctrine yet and everything else, and I couldn't. And he was kind of ugly, and I was trying to explain. I said, yeah, but, and well, all of a sudden, the cubicle is about 1.5 feet high. You know, it's got that fuzzy stuff. You know those ugly cubicles in offices. Kent Dana's face kind of comes over the cubicle, and I realize he's listening and he's watching. He leans over, and his face is red, and he looks irritated. I look up at his face, and he looks at me, and he says, he just looked at me, and with so much passion in his eyes, he goes, "You're doing the right thing." And he had kind of stayed out, and he hadn't said too much to me. He says, "You are doing the right thing." And I'm telling the guy, but I wasn't letting him get to me. So I get the guy off the phone, and Kent said to me, he goes, "All I will say to you is," he said, "it will be the best decision you've ever made, and especially for your family, for those boys." And he says, "And that's all I'm going to say." And he turned back around. I was just like, he was right there when this scary person called to kind of, so whenever there was a little thing like that, there was always somebody kind of there that, and I was pretty staunch, but then there was that backup too, and it was so nice. So in the newsroom, and Lou Ruggiero is one of our top-notch reporters too that was there. He's a member too. We had, and Ron Hoon, I've always have him as a close friend. He's at Channel 10. So there's a lot of members within the business, and it's been kind of an interesting thing for me. I've been now in Young Women's and in primary and all over the place. And I would say, and I'm perfectly honest to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not for the faint of heart. I'm tough, and I'm kind of a cowgirl, and I'm kind of, so it's kind of funny because this has been really good for me. It's been a really good for me too because of and being a mom and kind of being in the media and being in that business too. There are some tough, there's some tough things too. So, and I have had a couple of now moving back down in the transition and looking for work again and trying to get back into some certain things and finding that I have run into a couple of funny little things too that someone said, well, no, nope, we won't deal with you because you're, that blew me away. It blew me away.
Interesting.
I was like, but that's only happened to me one time, and I kind of left there thinking, well, good, that was a close call. I'm glad I'm not, near that. But that hasn't
wouldn't
happened.
have been a good match anyway.
No, it wouldn't have been a good match. So that was only one time. I've heard of that happening, but that was only one time in a million different things that I've, in business dealings and stuff. So that was kind of an odd thing. I think it was just a rare deal. So but it's been an awesome road. So
how long have you been a member now?
Well, let's see. My boys are now, they were 4 and 5. I always gauge it by their age. It's horrible. They are 15 and 16 now.
So about 10, 11 years.
Yeah, about 11 years, 11, 12
Wonderful.
years. Yeah.
Well, congratulations,
yes.
Jineane.
Thank
to
you
and your family.
Thank you very much. And when I went through the temple, it was on my birthday. So that was fun. I always remember that. The first time, and stuff. It was fun.
We have just a few minutes left here on Why I Believe, Jineane. And it's been just a pleasure to talk to you and
I
to hear
want
your
to apologize
story.
for interrupting you all the time and talking constantly, not letting you get a word in edgewise. I always do that. It's horrible. Sorry.
It's absolutely fine because it is about your story, not about me. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. As we close out Why I Believe today, would you mind just sharing your thoughts about the gospel in your life and your testimony? And you mentioned the temple. I know that being married in the temple was important to you. As we close out, will you share some of your thoughts about those things with our listeners?
Well, that's still a road we're on right now, because I am now remarried to a wonderful guy that is a member of the church, and I met him after my divorce and whatnot, but we have not been sealed in the temple yet together. And my boys too, the whole thing because their dad won't let that, we have to wait till they're older, so yeah. So I went through for my own endowments and that type of thing.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I've been, I think that the neatest thing in my journey is that even though it's not a perfect story, like you have just the perfect, you always have that, there's that one little writing about perfect mother or perfect family, or, and it's not that, mine's kind of, that's the beauty of the church, I think, is that really everyone has their own different story, and we're in our own different little places, but everyone is all apart and welcome and so loved within the gospel. And that's what I truly love, is I have seen that firsthand, and I've seen so many people picked up and lifted by it and really, really loved. And I think that the true thing, I think the two things are, and I tell the youth this all the time, please know the example and the missionary work you're doing just by being you and how you're living your life and what you're showing out there, because you are the start for a lot of those young kids that are in your school. You're their first missionaries, and you don't even think of yourselves that way. And I used to tell my young women that every day, the love you show and the caring you show, and then service. The service work is amazing.
Yeah, and that was a big influence in your life.
Big, huge influence.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think is that so many people are touched by those wonderful, wonderful basic things, and really, really loving one another and really doing the things that the church is really doing the things they're saying they're doing. They're really active. And for me, in being a youth, it was the place where everyone was talking to each other, supporting each other, loving one another. Never anything, ugly or judgmental, and I didn't run into any of that. And that is the real beauty. And I think it's so wonderful to, like, when I have to share one more really quick one. When I went with Austin the first time, my younger son was doing baptisms for the dead. It was so sweet. He comes out of the water, and I'm holding the towel as they're coming up, and he comes up, and I see on the look on his face, he looks like he's going to get emotional. It looks like he's going to cry or something, and he just kind of had a look on his face. He goes, "Mom," and I just said, and I looked at him, and I knew he wanted to say something to me, but he went to change, and so we're leaving the temple, and I said, "Honey, what's wrong?" And he came up to me, and he says, "Mom," and it was so cute because he says, "Mom," he had remembered every name. He's one of these kids that he remembers, he remembered every name, and he said, "Mom, what about so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so?" And he was talking about the names that he hadn't done their confirmations with, that there were different names, and he was so upset. Who's going to do those? Like, no, sweetie. Oh, no, they'll all be taken care of. He didn't realize he was thinking he gets to take the same people, and he was going to take them all the way through. Isn't that cute?
Yeah.
But it was so sweet because he was so concerned right away.
Yeah.
So I think the best thing about the church in my life right now is watching these boys, because my boys have this beautiful example, and they're not perfect we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but they're really, really good boys. And they have this base and this foundation that I hope and pray that they will continue on that path and be amazing young men and priesthood holders and just really have wonderful families. So I hope I've started something, and I am the only member in my entire, and then, like, doing my genealogy, that's a big thing for me. I'm finding, it goes off to Italy and Russia and Austria, and it's a really big. There's a lot of people. Yeah, that I'm starting to find out
sharing
about learning.
Sharing that information about all that extended family will be an influence to plant the seed with your direct family. Your
and I think the biggest thing too. And when I went through the temple, I remember talking to President Anderson at the time about this. As I said, the big overwhelming feeling I had is that I didn't expect is how many of my family members were just, I think they were just carrying me through I think that these ancestors that because I found that that none of their work had been done, and it's just, there's a ton of them. So, and now some of that's all being caught up with. There's so many of them that, wow. So.
Well, Jineane, you have a wonderful story and a wonderful family.
Thank you.
And so glad to hear about the influence the church has had on your life, and how you will influence many others and your family as well. So thank you so much for being a part of Why I Believe today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Why I Believe on the Mormon channel of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You can listen to new episodes every Tuesday at 1 o'clock on the Mormon channel, or you're welcome to download this episode and other episodes as well as other programs that are broadcast on the Mormon channel by going to mormonchannel.org. Thanks again for listening, and have a great day. Bye-bye.